Hello. So, I'm Julia. Thank you for coming this morning. It's not technically early, but it does feel early. And so thank you for that. Thank you very much, Elise, for the invitation. Thank you for the introduction. And most importantly, also thank you to the speakers of yesterday, which was a really intriguing and like lot to process for me. I'm really happy that I saw this. And I want to thank Loic, who's probably running around for the super tight and friendly organization of all of this. I will only talk about one example today because I felt that's better to focus on one. And it's about a reading group, and since anyway talking about talking is tempting, but sometimes still a little bit awkward, I want to start with reading.
Okay. I just read it. This marks not only the final stage in the commodification of the scopic, but also the triumph of vision over all the other senses. It is also something of a special concern from a feminist perspective, because it tends to reinstate a hierarchy of bodily perception that overprivileges vision over other senses, especially touch and sound. The primacy of vision has been challenged by feminist theories which have inspiring things to say about scopophilia, that is to say, a vision-centered approach to thought, knowledge, and science. Protheses, 2011. In a psychoanalytic perspective, this takes the form of a critique of the phallogocentric bias that is built into vision. Thus, Egle links it to the pervasive powers of the masculine symbolic. Keller reads it instead of a rapacious drive towards cognitive penetration of the secrets of nature, which bear a direct link to the social and psychic construction of masculinity. In a more socio-political framework, Harvey attacks the priority our culture gives to the logocentric hold of this embodied vision, which is best exemplified by the satellite eye in the sky. She opposed to it an embodied and therefore accountable redefinition of the act of seeing as a form of connection to the object of vision, which she defines in terms of passionate detachment.
Thank you very much, Shinaru. This is actually how the reading group worked. So the project that I'm going to introduce and look a little bit more closely today is called the Younger Reading Group. And it's founded by the artists Dorota, Gaweda, and Egle, Kulbokaite, that are based in Berlin and have now just recently set up a program at this art space Oslo 10 in Basel, which I think is a beautiful example because also yesterday speaking a little bit like a conceptual public, conceptual collective persona, they founded Agatha Valkyria Ice, who is this kind of fictional somebody who is technically the director of Oslo 10 now. And they founded the reading group in 2013 when a book came out by the collective Tikkun. That's like an artist, activist, French-based collective. And they have written a book that's called Technology. Should I use it?
Non, c'est bon.
Okay.
Plus fort. Allez,
Okay. So, where was I? The Younger Reading Group, founded 2013 in Berlin by those two ladies, youngers, who actually run this group every Sunday at 7, every time, like since 2013, wherever they are and with whomever they are and in which space. And it's been, it was instigated when this book came out, the theory, preliminary materials for the theory of the young girl, by this group Tikkun. It was published first in 1999 in French originally, but it was translated to English in 2013. And so when it came out, I felt like they wanted to read and discuss this, and so they started with this book, and that's why that was the first session. That's why the reading group's called like that. And it was also a really important book to me, not only because I've been following and like the tikkun theory that can't go too much in detail and has been really crucial to me, but also the concept of the young girl that is not a young girl necessarily, not young, not a girl, was also really important to my kind of growing up, like, process of, I don't know, post-adolescence or whatever. So it's also available online, actually. It's published by Semiotext in this version. And you can see it online also, and this is a screenshot from me, old screenshots, which I'm just going to read this last paragraph, but because that's like the crucial concept for where the reading group also departed from, which says, the young girl is not always young, and she's not always a girl. She is but the figure of total integration into a social totality that's disintegrating, end quote. So this just to get like the core problem that the younger reading group started to tackle. And since the republishing, because between 2013, of course, there are many things have happened, most of which, or the important ones I think we're discussing here, also in the post-digital context. So I want to look just quickly at this one paragraph that they added to the description of the book for its republication. And maybe somebody else wants to read it. Maybe Didem wants to read it, because Didem is a very good reader. Just the one starting from in the years since the book.
In the years since the book's first publication in French, the worlds of fashion, shopping, seduction, plans, makeover projects, and eating disorders have moved beyond the comparatively tame domain of paper magazines into the perpetual accessibility of internet culture. Here the young girl can seek her own reflection in corporate universals and social media exchange of personalities within the impersonal realm of the marketplace. Tracing consumer society's colonization of youth and sexuality through the young girl's freedom, in magazine terms, to do whatever she wants with her body. Tikkun exposes the rapaciously competitive and physically ruinous landscape of modern love.
Thank you for that. So while I unfortunately, as I said, can't go like much deeper into those details, I want to return, I will go now into how and why I set it up at the Kunsthalle in Zurich. And I'm going to go to a homepage for that. I was actually thinking last night while preparing it that the homepage is also such a weird, terrible word. Like in a Baudrillardian dystopia, it's probably like our only homes left or something. I was just wondering, like a new horror vacui of homelessness or so. But this is our homepage. Welcome to the Kunsthalle Zurich. And maybe it's good to also share a note on how that actually happens. I mean, what the hell is a curator of here and programs doing? So basically it starts, the artists come, you know, they're invited, they come for site visits. So what you do, not unlike most other curators, is to hang out with them, you try to understand their reference. For me, it's particularly important then to see what did they read, what did they look at, what's their context, what's their reference, try to understand them, try to read a little bit of the same thing like they do. Then they come installing and it gets really busy and you get to know them a little bit better and from different sides. And then you also need to understand what's missing, like what's their reference, what do you feel could be added, but can you add also to their discourse and context, most importantly. And then you had to just hang out, spend time like in the nights when they rearrange the whole show and have a beer. And this is the shows that we had at the time when we made the young girl reading group during the last month. This is Dorota, a young artist from Berlin, who made, who had her first big institutional solo show with us, like it often happens at the Kunsthalle, which is not only, of course, like a huge pressure, but also a really, as you can see, like a space that's very challenging to test things, to experiment, because it's very wide. I mean, the ones of you who haven't been there at the Löwenbräu will know that it's also just renovated and everything is a little bit, it's more like a hospital actually, I think. And so you need to understand, okay, how can we give a little bit of life back into this show? Because I also tend to think of openings rather as funerals. Like you have all this exciting time that I just mapped a little bit, and then there's this opening part, and then, you know, in some spaces it's just over. And so I think the main responsibility of curating public programs is trying to insert or like reinsert or just kind of reanimate that process of preparation during the duration of the exhibition. And Loretta's show was on our 3rd floor, and we also have a 2nd floor. We are on 2 floors at the Kunsthalle. It was by Pauline Baudry and Renate Lorenz, who maybe a little bit more of you may know here in Switzerland. Pauline's from French Swiss part. And they are particularly known, they work longer, they're older than Loretta, for feminist and activist practice. They work mainly in film and installation, and we produced this new film that you just see a little bit of it for the Kunsthalle. It's called Portrait of an Eye. And so it was not only like one universe to delve into, like not only understanding like one person's reference and context and mine, but those two. And the one thing that intrigued me with that is the age difference for once. This is not age like in biological age only, but also working on the same concepts such as feminism and film, but from rather different entry points, so to speak. So while Pauline and Renate, I think, you know, stand really strongly for like a feminist practice, such as the one we heard a little bit in the beginning, Loretta, for example, wouldn't feel very comfortable in using this term because, like other terms too, it has undergone like kind of landslide shifts in, you know, possibly 3 waves or however that's to be canonized. But I was interested in her reluctance to, when I proposed, like, okay, we're going to do like some sort of a program on revisiting that term. I mean, that's happened many times, but I felt the urge also in the Kunsthalle and at the Löwenbräu to have that kind of feminist moment. And she was like, nah, I'm not so sure. And that's what was actually the moment when I thought, like, okay, that's the point where we need to understand, like, how you distance yourself from those terms and concepts and how to reappropriate it maybe, or reclaim, or kind of, get more confident with this again, because like any other term, we speak about conceptual art still, even though it's changed so drastically. I think that concept of feminism would still be one that I would want to die for. So I was interested in this generational shift, and then I thought, okay, maybe then we're going to do it with really, really young people. And of course, this is not unproblematic, because even more so than sexism, I think ageism in contemporary art is a serious and very hard to tackle problem. And what I do, like in terms of methodology, usually is that I try to kind of over-affirm those problematic moments or situations, like go right into them and try to get the thing that's problematized out again and do it better. I mean, and of course we fail with that sometimes, but I feel having to go into that problem is a responsibility to know also what you're complaining about. And so I also, because during that time, next door in the Löwenbräu at the Luma Foundation, there was just this 89+ show in preparation that's now open. And so I thought, okay, then let's do something with kind of actually fresh blood, as terrible as it sounds, but do it in a different way. And then, of course, this whole process of research, so to speak, starts, and you look into, different projects that are ongoing, different initiatives. You think like, okay, what could be feeling, but also what do I want to relate to. And so I heard about this younger reading group, but before we did it, I've never been there, I've never attended it, and also I am not on Facebook, where most of their documentation and communication happens. So it was nice. I heard about like from friends and other people, and I don't even have an iPhone, so I don't have the app where they stream all their readings all the time, which doesn't mean like I'm technophobe, but I think particularly in that very intimate relationships to devices and protocols, it's important to keep your distance also at times. So I heard about it from friends, and one friend of mine, Garrett Nelson, namely, introduced me to them, and then we wanted to meet, but symptomatically also we were always too drunk when meeting, so we ended up Skyping about the projects. And what we decided is that we host 3 of their reading groups, and now it's a little bit fact sheet, not too much anecdotal anymore. So we did the number 96, the number 98, and the number 101 at the Kunsthalle, because it's an ongoing project, as I said. And always on Sundays at 7, as on their usual schedule, which was challenging. It sounds like super banal, but even having a program past the opening hours of a space such as the Kunsthalle Zurich was quite something. And I was also a little bit nervous about doing that and then do it in some sort of a convivial situation. But this is how it looked like, and this is Garrett in Mexico actually having that app and looking at us reading there. So in the first session on September 27, we read Rosi Braidotti's book, Nomadic Theory, the chapter 2, Metamorphosis, Women, Aliens, and Machines, from which we heard the first excerpt in the beginning. On the second one, on October 11, we read from Luis Irigaray, fantastic book, The Sex, which is not one, the chapter, The Looking Glass from the Other Side. And then the last, on the third installment, on the 1st of November, we read from Beatriz Preciado, formerly known as Beatriz Preciado, now Paul Preciado, the book that's also just been translated, Testo Junkie, Sex, Drugs, and Biopolitics in the Pharmacopornographic Era, in 2013, from which the diagram was, and that the very first slide that you saw. So we did this, and it was well attended. There was, of course, like a particular generation. There are friends and other people who came to this. It was very cozy, which for me was, speaking about the escape from the institution, something. I mean, it actually might sound banal in this context, but it was livable. It was just being there and also drinking beer and smoking even in our spaces, which was crazy. Some people know that how much a fire alarm costs in Switzerland, but it didn't happen, so it all went well. And then I felt, because I also have had like a particular reluctance to reading groups, because they can also be terror, and they can also be a serious waste of time. So I didn't have the feeling for that. I really felt like I needed to process also many things that we were speaking. And just to remind you, the setting is not that everybody brings a text and you discuss, but you really literally read paragraph by paragraph just in the round. Like, who doesn't want to read, doesn't read. But most people read as long as they want in their dialects with the blurry copies you've seen. It's mostly pirated, more or less, PDFs from somewhere. Even them posting them on the Kunsthalle webpage was another issue. And they usually read it on little devices like tablets or iPhones. But I couldn't do it because also I become like very confused and headache if I do that. So I always printed my paper, and everybody made fun of me, which was very super generative also to think about. And what happened then is that I still felt the need to approach, or I felt encouraged, so to speak, to go into one really complicated subject for me, which is the documentation. I mean, it starts with performance documentation, film screenings you can't ever document, but everything you do as a curator of public programs is basically just gone, and I generally think it's good like that. I mean, I'm not you know, I'm not a fan of like fetishizing archival material, but in this particular context, I wanted to get something out of it, and so we decided after each session that somebody who was there and felt like it would write a little recap, like a short paragraph of what we actually did. So because you haven't heard or seen anything from the second session, and because it's a fantastic text by Jackie Poloni, who was there, we're going to look a little bit at this. And is there still somebody who feels like reading it? Do you maybe want to read this thing or no? Just press the button. No, it doesn't work.
Oh, no, that's okay. From the start?
Just what you see. Oh, no, it's gone. Yeah.
And this time, sitting still on retuning, inhaling, reading Irigeri's first chapter of the text, which is not one, with Alice, who is a multitude, twisting between being she, other, and others, and who opens and reopens her eyes. Her indefinite selves and those around her, a multifaceted awareness in escaping a fixed being, and the multitudinous selves which others prescribe unto her, and more, a lower struggle hinged on points of view and gazes. The reading uploads the spaces of the text, the spaces within and without Alice beings, the rooms in the houses and the objects within them, the gardens outside, where we, as readers, are once again confronted with an indirect reflection upon our own spaces, among them the space of this moment of shared reading.
So I'm not 100% sure yet if it actually does work, but for me it still feels, but it's probably also hard to evaluate, having been there and writing and doing all these things, that we somehow managed in these little recaps to also communicate a little bit of the awkwardness and the terror of reading out loud. I mean, basically in school, it's like everybody's most hated thing to just suddenly you have to read out loud. And it's very hard also, what I learned late in my life, to think while you read. Like you're very occupied with your performance mainly, but it's exactly in this space where a lot of things happen for us and do continue to happen for the younger reading group that, of course, all of you has to see sooner or later, whenever near you. So to wrap it up in my remaining 4 minutes is the question that I think kind of emerges from this is the relationship between like a body of text, you could say like maybe that's theory, and the collective body, our collective bodies, or the bodies in space, which is the material more or less, if not material, but the substance you work with in public programming, in like live encounters created. So if that would be like a practice moment, I mean, of course it boils down to the relationship of theory and practice, but in that specific example, the relationship between text and body was particularly important for us to understand. And my answer, and you know the public programmers particularly always say like, we don't give answers, we only pose questions, like one of the most terrible things you have to hear over and over in conferences still. And yeah, it includes me too. So the answers that I found for today, or actually rather last night, when I was also thinking about the sessions we heard, is these 3 terms, right, that I felt could somehow summarize this attempt, which would be provision, protheses, and posteriority, which is super big terms to conclude with, probably technically like a really bad conclusion. But yeah, well, can't see the whole thing, but it's okay. I'm going to give you, because when really I look for answers, when I'm like impatient and unsatisfied, I was like questioning all the time, I do, and it actually is, I would say, like the main moment where I do find answers is etymology, weirdly. But it's always very true if you look at the, Harry also put it, is like the material, like the object of a word, its history, it's like being shaped or sculptured, used and transacted, transferred. So, but does provision actually mean? It's a really imaginative word I found. I really like it a lot. And it's defined as A, the action of providing or supplying something for use. And B, the arrangement for future eventualities or requirements. So, of course, like, you know, the vision, it's like foreseeing something. And it's also funny in German because etwas vorsehen is also very, has the same kind of duality of providing something for use for the future, kind of manage the future in a way. So I found that was, when I looked at the word, suddenly somewhere I saw it, like I think on an advertisement, so I was like, this is helpful. And Protheses is interesting in that context because we read it, I mean, a lot of reading groups before the ones we installed were also looking at this train of thought instigated at the History of Consciousness Department Center course by Donna Haraway, and also Rosi Bradotti's work is rather close to this kind of cyborgian prosthetic identities, which is important to think about if you think about bodies, that it's, and future, of course, that it's probably not just organic, but that it includes technologies, I mean, as in a prosthetic way, of course. And so on the one hand, it's like these replaced body parts, but in general, and it's also interesting because it involves the thesis in a way, and thesis doesn't actually mean more than placing, like putting something forward. And the pro is of course like the Latin prefix for before something. So in public, it's like putting something out there in stage, in front of you, in space, rather than provision in time. And the posteriority then again would probably be something like the opposite. It's defined as the quality or state of being later or subsequent, the state of being behind. So from, of course, the Latin again, posterior, later. It's basically the post of something, which is the main subject here. So in one sentence, this is always a little bit megalomaniac, but I'm going to try. I would say public programming in post-digital times, to me, seems nothing more, but actually absolutely nothing less than the act of supplying something for use, something to make future, something to place right before you in time and in space, in public, and therefore always also in a state of being behind. Thank you very much.